In fact, they do better deals than Ulysses, Joyce, and what have you, because they make...
Sean Connery's life off-screen was just as fascinating as the characters he played. The legendary actor dated widely, lived boldly, and rarely looked back. Yet there was one relationship that refused to stay in the past. Long after breakups, distance, and the chaos of Hollywood, one woman remained firmly in his heart. Their story didn't follow a simple path, and for years it unfolded far from public view. But when Connery finally spoke about the woman he could never quite forget, it revealed a deeply personal chapter that few people truly understood: the untold origins of Connery. Long before the world knew him as James Bond, he was simply Thomas Sean Connery. Growing up in Edinburgh, his friends called him Tommy, though he later chose to go by his middle name, Sean. The nickname that really followed him, though, was Big Tam, and it wasn't hard to see why. Even as a kid, Connery stood out. By the age of 12, he was already towering over his classmates. At 18, he had reached his full height, a solid, imposing 6'2". He came from a working-class Scottish family that believed in hard work and getting on with it. His father earned a living as a factory worker and truck driver, while his mother worked as a cleaner. Money was tight, and everyone chipped in. Sean learned that lesson early. Before he even turned 16, he was up in the wee hours of the morning delivering milk around Edinburgh. From there, the jobs never really stopped. What did stop, at least for a long while, was any clear sense of where his life was headed. Connery also developed a reputation as a ladies' man at a very young age. Years later, he openly admitted that he lost his virginity at just 14 to a woman who served in the Auxiliary Territorial Service, the women's branch of the British Army during World War II. That early encounter would leave a bigger impression on him than he realized at the time. Although he was too young to fight in the war, Connery was eager to serve. The moment he turned 16, he joined the Royal Navy. He embraced the life completely, even getting 2 tattoos almost right away. One dedicated to his family, the other reading Scotland Forever. At an age when most teenagers were still figuring themselves out, Connery was already a fully grown, tattooed sailor. He trained at gunnery school and served on an anti-aircraft crew, throwing himself into the routine and discipline of military life. For 3 years, it looked like the Navy might be his future. Then, suddenly, it was over. Connery developed a painful duodenal ulcer, and the condition forced the Navy to medically discharge him. Still barely out of his teens, he returned to Edinburgh with no clear plan and no safety net. What followed was a stretch of odd jobs that sounded almost unreal. He worked as a truck driver and a lifeguard. He polished coffins for a company called J&T Scott. He even modeled for art students at a local college. Through it all, one thing stayed constant. He was obsessed with building his body. Connery became a serious bodybuilder, training relentlessly and entering competitions, but he never quite reached the top. Part of the reason was simple. He refused to give up football. While many American bodybuilders avoided other sports out of fear of losing muscle, Connery couldn't stay away from the pitch. He played for several teams and his talent didn't go unnoticed. Then came the offer of a lifetime. At 23 years old, a working-class kid from Edinburgh was invited to play for Manchester United. For most players, that would have been the dream ending. Connery was thrilled, but only briefly. He did the math in his head and realized that football careers were short. Most players peaked by 30, and he didn't want to be left with nothing once the cheers faded. With remarkable foresight, he turned the offer down. Thankfully, another door was already cracking open. While training for bodybuilding contests, a friend mentioned auditions for a touring production of South Pacific. Connery went along and landed a spot in the chorus. As the show traveled, he slowly worked his way into bigger parts. For the first time, acting didn't feel like a fantasy. It felt possible. The job paid the bills and introduced him to new opportunities and to romance. Connery began dating a woman named Carol Soppel. For a while, it felt like something solid, but her family disapproved of him, partly because of his background. They made it clear he wasn't welcome, and the relationship ended abruptly. The heartbreak hit hard, and worse troubles were waiting just around the corner. Connery had grown up around hardship and street violence, but one night in particular would cement his reputation across Edinburgh. It began in a pool hall, when members of the feared Valdor gang tried to steal his jacket. Everyone in the city knew who they were. They were notorious for sewing razor blades into their clothing, a brutal tactic designed to slice open anyone who tried to grab them. Connery refused to back down. The gang followed him later to his job at the Palais de Danse, where 6 of them cornered him on an upper balcony. Their intention was clear: hurt him badly, or worse. What they didn't expect was Connery's strength. He trained regularly at a weightlifting hall and knew exactly how to fight. After a brief exchange of blows, he grabbed 2 of the men, one in each hand, and smashed their heads together. The other 4 fled. From that night on, no one bothered him again. The encounter earned him the respect of the city's most dangerous gang and sealed his image as a genuine hard man. Off the streets, Connery was surprisingly studious. Determined to become a serious actor, he spent his nights reading Shakespeare, Ibsen, and Tolstoy. He took elocution lessons to soften his thick Edinburgh accent. He was reshaping himself, inside and out. Even so, success came slowly. The 1950s were a grind. Connery accepted whatever work he could find: small theater roles, bit parts in films, minor television appearances. To survive, he even took on babysitting jobs. Casting directors eventually noticed his rugged presence and began offering him roles that matched it: boxers, laborers, truck drivers. Then came his first real breakthrough. Connery landed a leading role opposite Hollywood star Lana Turner in Another Time, Another Place. On screen, they played lovers. Off-screen, tabloids went wild, convinced the chemistry was real. Photographers followed them to upscale London restaurants, fueling rumors of an affair. There was a serious problem. Turner was dating Johnny Stompanato, a volatile mob enforcer tied to crime boss Mickey Cohen. His relationship with Turner was already toxic and violent. When gossip about Connery reached him, Stompanato exploded. He threatened Turner's life and flew to London, intent on confronting Connery. Despite Turner's pleas to stay away, Stompanato showed up at the film studio and walked in on a romantic scene being shot. According to reports, he pulled a gun on Connery. Connery didn't hesitate. He grabbed Stompanato's wrist, disarmed him, and knocked him to the ground with a single punch. Police were called, and Stompanato was deported back to the United States. Not long after, the story took a tragic turn. Stompanato was killed during a violent argument with Turner. Her 14-year-old daughter, Cheryl Crane, stabbed him while trying to protect her mother. A coroner's jury later ruled the act justifiable homicide, and Crane was released after only weeks in juvenile detention. The mob didn't accept the ruling. They believed someone had to pay, and rumors once again pointed toward Connery. Mickey Cohen himself allegedly called Connery while he was staying at the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel, issuing a blunt warning: leave town or die. Connery understood the danger. His career was finally gaining traction, and he had just signed a 7-year contract with 20th Century Fox. He chose survival. He quietly relocated to the San Fernando Valley and stayed out of sight until the situation cooled. Looking back, Connery later admitted he had no interest in testing the mob's patience. He stayed hidden, kept working, and waited for the storm to pass, unaware that, just around the corner, the role that would define his life was waiting. The choice that changed everything. Sean Connery never quite fit the mold of the smooth, polished leading men dominating Hollywood at the time. He came across more like a rough diamond, rugged, raw, and still a little unpolished around the edges. Most of the time, that rebellious charm worked in his favor. But when he first met photographer Julie Hamilton, it had the opposite effect. She later admitted she found him downright off-putting. Then, something unexpected shifted everything. One day, Hamilton saw Connery dressed in a traditional Scottish kilt, proudly embracing his heritage. The transformation was instant. The same man she had dismissed suddenly struck her as incredibly striking. From that moment, her opinion flipped completely, and she soon described him as the most handsome man she had ever seen. Connery, who had already been deeply drawn to her, finally saw his feelings returned. The two quickly built a life together, settling into a modest London flat, meeting each other's families, and forming a strong partnership. As Connery worked tirelessly to establish himself as a serious actor, Hamilton became his greatest supporter. Their relationship was built on mutual loyalty, something that would soon be tested in a major way. In 1960, Hamilton was diagnosed with tuberculosis, a frightening and potentially deadly illness at the time. Almost simultaneously, Connery received the kind of opportunity actors spend their entire careers chasing: a major role alongside Charlton Heston in the historical epic El Cid. It was the sort of part that could instantly launch him into stardom. Connery faced an agonizing decision between career advancement and personal devotion. In the end, he chose to remain by Hamilton's side, turning down the high-profile role to support her through recovery. It was a massive professional risk, but surprisingly, the gamble paid off. The industry did not blacklist him, and he was eventually given another opportunity, reinforcing the idea that his career would not be destroyed by putting love first. To outsiders, Connery and Hamilton seemed destined for marriage. They were widely viewed as one of Hollywood's most promising couples, but their relationship unraveled in an unexpectedly quiet and uncomfortable moment. According to Hamilton, the turning point came while they were relaxing in bed. Without warning, Connery casually praised the eyes of actress Diane Cilento, whom he had been working with on a television production and who was still married at the time. Hamilton immediately sensed something had shifted. She confronted him directly, and Connery responded with blunt honesty, admitting that his feelings for her had faded. The relationship ended almost instantly, bringing a sudden close to what many believed was a lasting romance. Years later, they would meet again under very different circumstances. Hamilton had moved forward with her life, marrying and having a son named Jason. During their reunion, Connery made a deeply personal promise, telling her that if he ever had a son, he would name the child Jason as a tribute to her support during his struggling years. Connery's growing relationship with Diane Cilento introduced complications, particularly because she was still married. However, it also placed him in the right environment at the right moment. Cilento introduced him to producer Harry Saltzman, who was attempting to accomplish something unprecedented, bringing Ian Fleming's James Bond novels to the big screen. Landing the role was far from guaranteed. Fleming himself strongly disagreed with the producers about who should portray Bond, favoring a more refined and traditionally suave actor. The studio initially pursued Cary Grant, but negotiations collapsed when Grant refused to commit to more than one film, while producers envisioned a long-running franchise. Desperate to find their lead, the The filmmakers even organized a public talent search, selecting a winner who ultimately lacked the acting ability required for the role. Only then did Connery begin to gain serious consideration, and he approached the audition with an unconventional strategy. Instead of presenting himself as polished and sophisticated, Connery leaned fully into his natural persona. He arrived in slightly rumpled clothing and carried himself with a raw, working-class edge. What seemed like a risky move turned out to be exactly what the producers were looking for. They saw something unique in him and cast him as Bond in Dr. No, a decision that would permanently alter the course of his career. Although Connery had already worked hard to refine his accent and presence, the producers knew additional transformation was necessary. He underwent an intensive crash course in etiquette, style, and social refinement, shaping him into the elegant and effortlessly confident figure audiences would soon associate with the character. The introduction of Bond became one of cinema's most memorable moments. During a casino scene, when Sylvia Trench asked for his name, Connery delivered the line that would define the franchise and cement his legacy. As Dr. No exploded into international success, Connery's personal life also moved quickly. Around the time of the film's release, Cilento finalized her divorce, discovered she was pregnant, and accepted Connery's marriage proposal. With Bond fever sweeping through the United Kingdom, the couple sought privacy by arranging a secret wedding in Gibraltar. Even that private plan encountered serious obstacles. Political tensions in Gibraltar were high, and their attempt to travel separately to avoid attention created unexpected problems. Cilento was detained by border officials due to a passport clerical error, causing her to miss her scheduled ferry and nearly miss her own wedding. After a tense delay, she managed to reach Gibraltar, and the couple married, though their future together would eventually prove unstable. When their son was born, Connery honored the promise he had made years earlier by naming the child Jason. Cilento stepped back from her own acting ambitions to support Connery's rapidly rising career and focus on raising their family. She even brought their young son to the set of From Russia with Love, the next Bond installment. Despite Bond's massive success, not everyone initially believed Connery was the right choice. Ian Fleming had originally favored Roger Moore. Over time, however, Connery's portrayal changed Fleming's opinion so dramatically that he began adjusting Bond's personality in his later novels, incorporating more humor and charisma inspired by Connery's performance. While Bond transformed Connery into a global superstar, it also placed intense strain on his marriage. Even before signing the multi-film contract, Connery worried that playing Bond repeatedly would permanently typecast him. Ironically, Cilento had strongly encouraged him to accept the role, a decision she later regretted as the pressure and fame began to fracture their relationship. By 1965, their marriage reached a breaking point when Cilento announced she was leaving and taking their child. Connery responded with emotional distance, moving out before she could fully separate from him. Although they briefly reunited professionally while filming Thunderball, the relationship was beyond repair. Crew members frequently overheard explosive arguments between them, reflecting the growing tension. Off-camera, their rivalry intensified. Connery's career continued to soar, while Cilento struggled to maintain similar momentum. Despite efforts to salvage the marriage, it became increasingly clear that their relationship was nearing its end. Meanwhile, Bond's overwhelming success gave Connery significant negotiating power in Hollywood. Determined to avoid being permanently defined by the spy character, he leveraged his popularity to secure a leading role in Alfred Hitchcock's Marnie. With only 2 Bond films remaining in his contract, Connery saw hope for expanding his acting range beyond the iconic secret agent. Yet the Bond franchise continued pulling him back into its orbit. Connery had always been known for performing many of his own stunts, long before it became a common expectation for action stars. However, that dedication nearly proved fatal during the filming of Thunderball. One particularly dangerous sequence required Connery to swim in a pool containing live sharks. Understandably nervous, he was reassured by the construction of a plexiglass barrier designed to separate him from the animals. Unfortunately, the protective shield was incomplete due to material shortages. During filming, one of the sharks slipped through an opening in the barrier and entered Connery's section of the pool. The situation escalated instantly. Connery reacted without hesitation, scrambling out of the water as quickly as possible. His rapid escape likely saved his life and preserved the future of the Bond franchise, turning what could have been a tragic accident into one of the most terrifying behind-the-scenes stories in film history. Stardom came with consequences. At the beginning of the 1960s, Sean Connery appeared to be living the kind of life most actors only dream about. He was newly married, had just secured the role that would define a generation as James Bond, and seemed to be standing at the peak of his career. But as the decade wore on, the excitement slowly gave way to frustration. Connery began to feel boxed in, both professionally and personally, and the success that once felt thrilling started to feel limiting. The tension eventually reached a breaking point just before production began on You Only Live Twice. Connery made it clear to the studio that he was ready to walk away from Bond entirely. Producers were left scrambling to figure out what the future of the franchise would look like without its star. At the same time, his marriage to Diane Cilento was also deteriorating. While the exact details of how she responded to his decision remain unclear, their relationship ultimately ended in divorce in February 1971. Connery wasted little time dwelling on the split, and quickly re-entered the social and dating scene in Hollywood. His romantic life soon became just as complicated as his professional one. He was linked to several high-profile actresses, including Magda Konopka and Lana Wood. During the filming of Diamonds Are Forever in 1971, Connery reportedly became involved with both Wood and fellow co-star Jill St. John at the same time. Industry insiders later suggested that this situation contributed to a long-standing feud between the two actresses, a rivalry that would linger publicly for decades. Meanwhile, after Connery initially stepped away from Bond, producers selected Australian model and actor George Lazenby as his replacement. Lazenby was even signed to an ambitious 7-film contract. However, his tenure collapsed almost immediately, and he exited the role after only one appearance. The failure to secure a lasting successor left the franchise in a vulnerable position. In a surprising twist, Connery eventually agreed to return to the role in 1971, despite his earlier determination to distance himself from the character. His decision was driven largely by business and creative leverage. He demanded an unprecedented salary and negotiated for the studio to finance 2 personal film projects of his choosing after completing another Bond installment. When the studio agreed to his terms, Connery used a significant portion of his earnings to establish a trust that supported Scottish artists, reflecting his deep connection to his homeland. Once Diamonds Are Forever was completed, Connery focused on projects that allowed him to stretch his range as an actor. He collaborated with director Sidney Lumet and later starred alongside his close friend Michael Caine in The Man Who Would Be King. He also portrayed an aging Robin Hood and appeared in an ensemble adaptation of an Agatha Christie mystery. While these roles demonstrated his versatility, not every project achieved commercial success. In 1974, Connery took one of the most unusual roles of his career in the science fiction film Zardoz. The film's strange concept and Connery's distinctive costume drew widespread criticism at the time. Although the movie struggled with audiences initially, it eventually developed a cult following. According to director John Boorman, Connery accepted the project partly because he was having difficulty securing consistent work after leaving Bond behind. By the early 1980s, Connery's legacy as a cinematic icon was firmly established. He surprised audiences again by returning to the Bond universe for the 1983 film Never Say Never Again. The title reflected his earlier vow that he would never reprise the role. The production proved to be extremely stressful. Connery became heavily involved in creative decisions, requesting script changes and selecting writers himself. Production challenges mounted when the film's fight trainer accidentally broke Connery's wrist during rehearsals. The trainer responsible was a young Steven Seagal, whose martial arts instruction had been intended to prepare Connery for action scenes. The injury became one of the most memorable behind-the-scenes incidents of his later career. Connery later reflected that he had become overly confident during training and attempted to demonstrate a technique beyond his ability, which resulted in the accident. Following the demanding experience of filming Never Say Never Again, Connery stepped away from Hollywood for 2 years. When he returned, he did so with remarkable success. His performance in The Untouchables earned him an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor, introducing him to a new generation of audiences. He further strengthened his popularity by portraying Henry Jones Sr., the father of Indiana Jones, in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Despite professional triumphs, controversy continued to follow Connery's personal life. In 1993, singer-songwriter Lindsay DePaul publicly claimed she had engaged in an affair with him in 1989. She alleged that their relationship began after they met at a party and continued for several months before ending abruptly. Connery denied the allegations. Around the same time, actress Lana Wood also discussed a reported affair during the filming of Diamonds Are Forever, claiming their relationship ended amicably when she realized her feelings for another partner. Connery again denied these claims. Additional allegations surfaced from Danish journalist Helle Byrne, who asserted she had an extended relationship with Connery following an interview. Throughout these controversies, Connery's second wife, Micheline Roquebrune, maintained a dignified silence and remained publicly supportive. Connery's outspoken support for Scottish independence also influenced his public image. His patriotism dated back to his naval service, where he had tattoos expressing loyalty to Scotland and his family. His political stance reportedly contributed to delays in receiving a knighthood, as opponents resisted honoring him. However, in 2000, he was finally knighted by Queen Elizabeth II during a ceremony in Edinburgh. Connery described the recognition as one of the proudest moments of his life, particularly because it took place on Scottish soil. During the late 1990s and early 2000s, Connery continued appearing in films, but his final major project proved deeply frustrating. The production of The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen was plagued by conflicts between Connery and director Stephen Norrington. Their disagreements became so intense that reports suggested their arguments nearly escalated into physical confrontation. The tension continued even after filming ended, and Connery made a cutting remark about the absent director during the film's promotional events. Although he never formally announced retirement at that time, he effectively stepped away from live-action filmmaking after the project. In 2006, Connery officially confirmed his retirement from acting, expressing strong dissatisfaction with what he viewed as declining standards within the film industry. Despite his legendary status as Bond, many fans were unaware that he had begun losing his hair at a young age and wore hairpieces throughout his appearances as the iconic spy. That same year, his former wife, Diane Salento, released an autobiography containing serious allegations of physical and emotional abuse during their marriage. Connery firmly denied the accusations and stated that violence against women was never justified. However, older interviews resurfaced in which Connery had made controversial remarks about relationships and physical confrontation, reigniting public criticism and debate. On October 31, 2020, news broke that Sean Connery had passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 90 while residing in the Bahamas. His wife Micheline was with him during his final moments and later described their life together as deeply fulfilling. Medical reports listed old age as a primary factor in his death, with pneumonia and atrial fibrillation also contributing to his declining health. Roquebrune later revealed that Connery had struggled with dementia in his final years, describing the illness as particularly heartbreaking because it gradually robbed him of his ability to communicate. Close friends, including Michael Caine and racing legend Jackie Stewart, later spoke publicly about witnessing Connery's mental decline, describing it as deeply painful to observe. After his passing, Connery was cremated in the Bahamas, but his final wish was for his remains to be returned to Scotland. His family later arranged for his ashes to be scattered in St. Andrews at the Royal and Ancient Golf Club, a location that held deep personal meaning for him. The ceremony was delayed due to the global COVID-19 pandemic, but was eventually carried out in accordance with his wishes. Connery had spent nearly 3 decades living in Nassau, where he enjoyed privacy and relative anonymity. However, his residence there also sparked criticism, particularly because of his vocal advocacy for Scottish independence. Some critics accused him of hypocrisy for supporting Scottish nationalism while living abroad. Connery attempted to address these accusations by releasing financial disclosures showing significant tax contributions to the United Kingdom. Despite this, debates about his political and personal choices continued long after his passing, reflecting the complex legacy of a man who remained both celebrated and controversial throughout his life. Sean Connery. Names: the one woman that he never got over. Following his divorce from Diane Cilento, Sean Connery spent several years dating, but eventually one woman stood out from everyone else: a French-Moroccan painter named Micheline Roquebrune. Their relationship would become one of the most important and lasting chapters of his life. Their story began in 1970 at a golf tournament in Morocco. When Micheline first noticed Connery, she had no idea she was looking at one of the most recognizable movie stars in the world. To her, he was simply an attractive man with a strong presence. She later explained that she first saw him from behind and was immediately struck by his athletic build. But at that moment, she knew nothing about his fame or career. That same night, she experienced a vivid dream in which she found herself in his arms, feeling an overwhelming sense of calm and comfort. The dream left such a strong impression that she returned to the tournament the following day, determined to find him. Their meeting sparked an immediate connection that neither of them could ignore. During their early interactions, they faced a slight language barrier, as Micheline spoke primarily French, while Connery spoke English. Despite this, they quickly found ways to communicate through gestures, expressions, and shared experiences. Their chemistry was unmistakable from the beginning. Their relationship intensified rapidly. Within a day of meeting, their attraction had grown deeply personal, marking the beginning of a passionate affair. At the time, Connery was still legally married to Cilento, which made the situation complicated, but it did little to slow the emotional intensity between him and Micheline. Micheline would later reflect on those first days as overwhelming and unforgettable. She described Connery as possessing a powerful charisma and physical presence that completely captivated her. For several days after their initial encounter, they maintained an unusual routine. In public, they behaved as though they were little more than acquaintances, spending time together on the golf course while maintaining appearances. In private, however, their relationship deepened quickly, and both later described those early moments as emotionally transformative. Despite the strong bond they had formed, reality soon pulled them apart. After leaving Morocco, they returned to their separate lives and relationships. For nearly 2 years, they had no contact with each other. Then, unexpectedly, Micheline received a message inviting her to meet Connery in Marbella, Spain. At first, she approached the invitation with skepticism, questioning his motives and wondering whether reconnecting was wise. However, once they met again, the doubts disappeared. Connery openly expressed that he had never stopped thinking about her, and the emotional connection they once shared quickly resurfaced. Their relationship continued to develop despite logistical challenges. Micheline was living in North Africa with her children, which meant they often spent long periods apart. Even with the distance, Connery remained deeply committed to her. He later described Micheline as an extraordinary woman and openly acknowledged her as the love of his life. Their romance remained largely private, while both finalized their previous marriages. Once they were free to fully commit to each other, attention from the media intensified. Rumors of an upcoming wedding began circulating in the early 1970s. Connery, however, deliberately misled reporters by claiming in early 1975 that they had already married months earlier. In reality, the ceremony had not yet taken place. When they eventually married later that year, Connery chose Gibraltar as the wedding location, the same place where he had married his first wife years earlier. Despite the unusual coincidence, the marriage between Connery and Micheline proved far more enduring. Their partnership remained strong for decades, built on deep affection, mutual respect, and shared interests. By the 1990s, the couple decided to relocate permanently to the Bahamas, settling into a spacious villa where they embraced a quieter lifestyle away from constant public attention. Even after many years together, they made a conscious effort to maintain romance in their relationship, regularly spending time together and enjoying private outings. Friends and observers often noted that their connection retained a playful and affectionate quality well into later life. Stories occasionally surfaced about them enjoying simple activities together, reinforcing the idea that their relationship remained lively and deeply personal. Connery appeared to approach aging with confidence and acceptance, while Micheline occasionally expressed concern about time passing quickly. Connery viewed growing older as simply another stage of life, believing that new challenges and experiences always lay ahead. Over the years, their marriage came to represent stability in Connery's otherwise high-profile and sometimes turbulent public life. Their relationship endured the pressures of fame, distance, and time, ultimately becoming one of the most defining and lasting partnerships of his personal story.